Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Let us start with our recitation. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you. So we were reading chapter 8, 36 sloka, where Kunti Maharani prayers and Parikshit Maharaj saved. 836. शृण्वन्ति गायन्ति कृणन्ति अभीक्ष्णः स्मरन्ति नन्दन्ति तवेहितं जना त एव पश्यन्ति अचिरेण तावकं भवप्रवारोपरणं पदाम्बुजम्. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Yes.
O Krishna, those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities, or take pleasure in others doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. Purport. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna cannot be seen by our present conditional vision. In order to see him, one has to change his present vision to developing a different condition of life full of spontaneous love of Godhead. When Sri Krishna was personally present on the face of the globe, not everyone could see him as supreme personality of Godhead. Materialistic, like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, Jarasan, and Shishupala were highly qualified personalities by acquisition of material assets, but they were unable to appreciate the presence of the Lord. Therefore, even though the Lord may be present before our eyes, it is not possible to see him unless we have the necessary vision. The necessary qualification is developed by the process of devotional service only. Beginning with hearing about the Lord from the right sources, the Bhagavad Gita is one of the popular literature which are generally heard, chanted, repeated, etc. by the people in general. But in spite of such hearing, etc., sometimes it is experienced that the performer of such devotion service does not see the Lord face to face. The reason is first item, Sravana, is very important. If hearing is from right resource, it acts very quickly. Generally, people hear from unauthorized persons. Such unauthorized persons may be very learned by academic qualifications, but because they do not follow the principles of devotional service, hearing from them becomes a sheer waste of time. Sometimes the texts are interpreted fashionably to suit their own purpose. Therefore, first one should select a competent and bona fide speaker and then hear from him. When the hearing process is perfect and complete, the other processes become automatically perfect in their own way.
Hare Krishna Vella Mataji.
Hare Krishna. There are different transcendental activities of the Lord, and each and every one of them is competent to bestow the result provided the hearing process is perfect. In the Bhagavatam, the activities of the Lord begin with his dealings with the Pandavas. There are many other pastimes of the Lord in connection with his dealing with the Asuras and others. And in the 10th canto, the sublime dealings with the conjugal associates, the gopis, as well as with his married wives at Dwarka are mentioned. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no difference in the transcendental nature of each and every dealing of the Lord. But sometimes people in an unauthorized hearing process take more interest in hearing about his dealing with the gopis. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer. So a bona fide speaker of the dealings of the Lord should never indulge in such hearings. One must hear about the Lord from the very beginning, as in Srimad Bhagavatam or any other scriptures, and that will help the hearer attain perfection by progressive development. One should not therefore considering that his dealings with the Pandavas are less important than his dealing with the gopis. We must always remember that the Lord is always transcendental to all mundane attachment. In all the above mentioned dealings of the Lord, he is the hero in all circumstances, and hearing about him or his devotees or combatants is conducive to spiritual life. It is said that the Vedas and Puranas, etc., are all made to revive our lost relation with him. Hearing of all these scriptures is essential. Hare Krishna.
37. Api adyanastam swakritrihita prabho jihasasi svit suhrudo anujivina yesham na chanyad bhavata padam bhujat parayanam rajasu yojitamsham. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Abhishek Prabhu. Listen. You
Hare
too.
Krishna. Translation. All duties yourself. Are you leaving us today? Though we are completely dependent on your mercy and have no one else to protect us. Now, when all kings are at enmity with us. Purport. The Pandavas are most fortunate because to be dependent on the mercy of. Am I audible?
Yeah.
On the mercy of someone else is the utmost sign of misfortune. But in the case of our transcendental relation with the Lord, it is the most fortunate case when we can live completely dependent on him. The material disease is due to, but the cruel material nature does not allow us to become independent. The false attempt to become independent of the stringent laws of nature is known as material advancement or experimental knowledge. The whole material world is moving on this false attempt of becoming independent of the laws of nature. Beginning from Ravana, who wanted to prepare a direct staircase to the planets of heaven, down to the present age, they are trying to overcome the laws of nature. They are trying now to approach distant planetary systems by electronic mechanical power. But the highest goal of human civilization is to work hard under the guidance of the Lord and become completely dependent on him. The highest achievement of perfect civilization is to work with valor, but at the same time depend completely on the Lord. The Pandavas were the ideal executors of this standard of civilization. Undoubtedly, they were completely dependent on the goodwill of the Lord Sri Krishna. But they were not idle parasites of the Lord. They were all highly qualified, both by personal character and by physical activities. Still, they always looked for the mercy of the Lord because they knew that every living being is dependent by constitutional position. The perfection of life is therefore to become dependent on the will of the Lord instead of becoming falsely independent in the material world.
Those who try to become falsely independent of the Lord are called anatha or without any guardian, whereas those who are completely dependent on the will of the Lord are called sanatha or those who having someone to protect them. Therefore, we must try to be sanatha so that we can always be protected from the unfavorable condition of material existence. By deluding power of the external material nature, we forget that the material condition of life is the most undesirable perplexity. The Bhagavad Gita therefore directs us 7.19 that after many births, one fortunate person becomes aware of the fact that Vasudeva is in all and all, that the best way of leading one's life, that is the sign of a Mahatma. All the members of the Pandava family were Mahatmas in the household life. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the head of these Mahatmas and Queen Kunti Devi was the mother. The lessons of the Bhagavad Gita and all the Puranas, specifically the Bhagavad Purana, are therefore inevitably connected with the history of Pandava Mahatmas. For them, separation from the Lord was just like the separation of a fish from water. Srimati Kunti Devi therefore felt such separation like a thunderbolt, and the whole prayer of the queen is to try to persuade the Lord to stay with them. After the battle of Kurukshetra, although the inimical kings were killed, their sons and grandsons were still there to deal with the Pandavas. It is not only the Pandavas who were put in the condition of enmity, but all of us are always in such a condition. And the best way of living is to become completely dependent on the will of the Lord and thereby overcome all difficulties of material existence. Hare Krishna.
Evayam nama rupabhyam yaduvi saha pandava bhavato adarsanam yarhi risikanam hivesitu. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Nitya Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Translation. As the name and fame of a particular body is finished with the disappearance of the living spirit, similarly, if you do not look upon us, all our fame and activities, along with the Pandavas and Yadus, will end at once. Purport. Kunti Devi is quite aware that the existence of the Pandavas is due to Sri Krishna only. The Pandavas are undoubtedly well established in name and fame and are guided by the great king Yudhishthira, who is morality personified, and the Yadus are undoubtedly great allies, but without the guidance of Lord Krishna, all of them are non-entities, as much as the senses of the body are useless without the guidance of consciousness. No one should be proud of his prestige, power, and fame without being guided by the favor of the Supreme Lord. The living beings are always dependent, and the ultimate dependable object is the Lord Himself. We may therefore invent by our advancement of material knowledge all sorts of contracting material resources, but without being guided by the Lord, all such inventions end in fiasco. However strong and stout the reactionary elements may be. Hare Krishna.
Neyam sobhishyate tatra yate dhaninam gadadhara tvatpade ankita bhati swalakshana vilakshitaye. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sagar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. O Gadadhara Krishna, our kingdom is now being marked by the impressions of your feet, and therefore it appears beautiful. But when you leave, it will no longer be so. But there are certain particular marks on the feet of Lord which distinguish Lord from others. The marks of a flag, thunderbolt, and instrument to drive an elephant, umbrella, lotus, disc, etc. are on the bottom of the Lord's feet. These marks are impressed upon the soft dust of the land where the Lord traverses. The land of Hastinapura thus was marked while Lord Sri Krishna was there with Pandavas, and the kingdom of the Pandava thus flourished by such auspicious signs.
Kunti Devi pointed out these distinguished features and was afraid of all ill luck in the absence of the Lord. 40. Imejana pada sruddha supakvasudi viruddha vanardi nadi udanmato hi edante tava vikshitaha. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sri Ganesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. All the cities and villages are flourishing in all respects because the herb and grains are in abundance. The trees are full of fruits. The rivers are flowing. The hills are full of minerals. The oceans are full of wealth. And this is all due to your glancing over them. Purport. Human prosperity flourishes by natural gift and not by gigantic industrial enterprises. The gigantic industrial enterprises are products of godless civilization, and they cause the destructions of the noble aims of human life. The more we go on increasing such troublesome industries to squeeze out the vital energy of the human being, the more there will be unrest and dissatisfaction of the people in general. Although a few only can live lavishly by exploitation. The natural gifts such as grains, vegetable fruits, rivers, the hills of jewels and minerals, and the seas full of pearls are supplied by this order of Supreme. And as he desires, the material nature produces them in abundance or restricts them at times. The nature law is that the human being may take advantage of these godly gifts by nature and satisfactorily flourish on them without being captivated by the exploitative motion of lordings over material nature. The more we attempt to exploit material nature according to our whims of enjoyment, the more we shall become entrapped by the reaction of such exploitative attempts. If we have sufficient grains, fruits, vegetables, and herbs, then what is the necessity of running a slaughterhouse and killing poor animals? A man need not kill an animal if he was sufficient grains and vegetables to eat. The flow of river water fertilizes the fields, and there is no more that what we need. Minerals are produced in the hills, in the jewels in the oceans. The human civilization has sufficient grades, minerals, jewels, water, milks, etc. Then why should it hanker after terrible industrial enterprises at the cost of labor of some unfortunate men? But all these natural gifts are dependent on the mercy of Lord. What we need, therefore, is to be obedient to the laws of Lord and achieve the perfection of human life by devotional service. The indication by Kunti Devi are just to the point. She desires that God's mercy be bestowed upon them so that the natural prosperity be maintained by His grace. Hare Krishna.
41. Ata Vishvesha Viswatman Vishwamurte Swakeshu me Sneha Pasham Imam Chindi Dridam Pandyusu Vrishnishu. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Venla Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. O Lord of the universe, O personality of form of the universe, please therefore sever my tie of affection for my kinsmen, the Pandavas and the Vrishnis. Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord is ashamed to ask anything in self-interest from the Lord. But the householders are sometimes obliged to ask favors from the Lord, being bound by the tie of family affection. Srimati Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact and therefore she prayed to the Lord to cut off the affectionate tie from her own kinsmen, the Pandavas and Vrishnis. The Pandavas are her own sons and the Vrishnis are members of her paternal family. Krishna was equally related to both the families. Both the families required the Lord's help because both were dependent devotees of the Lord. Srimati Kunti Devi wished Sri Krishna to remain with her sons, the Pandavas, but by his doing so, her paternal house would be bereft of the benefit. All these partialities troubled the mind of Kunti, and therefore she desired to cut off the affectionate tie. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Anita Mataji. You can continue.
Hare Krishna.
Abhishek Prabhu. Yeah.
A pure devotee cuts off the limited ties of affection for his family and widens his activity of forgotten souls. The typical example is the band of 6 Goswamis who followed the path of Lord Chaitanya. All of them belonged to the most enlightened and cultured rich families of the higher castes. but for the benefit of the mass of population, they left their comfortable homes and became mendicants. To cut off all family affection means to broaden the field of activity. Without doing this, no one can be qualified as a Brahmana, a king, a public leader, or a devotee of the Lord. The personality of Godhead as an ideal king showed by example. Sri Ramachandra cut off the tie of affection for his beloved wife to manifest the qualities of an ideal king.
Hare Krishna, Saraswati.
Hare Krishna. Such personalities as a Brahmana, a devotee, a king, or a public leader must be very broad-minded in discharging their respective duties. Srimati Kunti Devi was conscious of this fact, and being weak, she prayed to be free from such bondage of family affection. The Lord is addressed as the Lord of the universe or the Lord of the universal mind, indicating his all-powerful ability to cut the hard knot of his family affection. Therefore, it is sometimes experienced that the Lord, out of his special affinity towards a weak devotee, breaks the family affection by force of circumstances arranged by his all-powerful energy. By doing so, he causes the devotee to become completely dependent on him and thus clears the path for his going back to Godhead.
42. त्वयि मे अनन्य विषया मतिर्मधुपते असकृत् रतिम् उद्वतात् अधा गंगे भोगम उदन्मति. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna Nita Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. Purport. Perfection of pure devotional service is attained when all attention is diverted towards the transcendental loving service of the Lord. To cut off the tie of all other affections does not mean complete negation of the finer elements like affection for someone else. This is not possible. A living being, whoever he may be, must have this feeling of affection for others because this is a symptom of life. The symptoms of life, such as desire, anger, hankerings, feelings of attraction, etc., cannot be annihilated. Only the objective has to be changed. Desire cannot be negated, but in devotional service, the desire is changed only for the service of the Lord in place of desire for sense gratification. The so-called affection for family, society, country, etc. consists of different phases of sense gratification. When this desire is changed for the satisfaction of the Lord, it is called devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that Arjuna desired not to fight with his brothers and relations just to satisfy his own personal desires. But when he heard the message of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, he changed his decision and served the Lord. And for his doing so, he became a famous devotee of the Lord. For it is declared in all the scriptures that Arjuna attained spiritual perfection by devotional service to the Lord in friendship. The fighting was there, the friendship was there, Arjuna was there, and Krishna was there. But Arjuna became a different person by devotional service. Therefore, the prayers of Kunti also indicate the same categorical changes in activities. Srimati Kunti wanted to serve the Lord without diversion, and that was her prayer. This unalloyed devotion is the ultimate goal of life. Our attention is usually diverted to a service of something which is non-godly or not in the program of the Lord. When the program is changed into the service of the Lord, that is to say, when the senses are purified in relation with the service of the Lord, it is called pure unalloyed devotional service. Srimati Kunti Devi wanted that perfection and prayed for it from the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji. Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Her affection for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis is not out of the range of devotional service, because the service of the Lord and the service of devotees are identical. Sometimes Service to the devotee is more valuable than service to Lord. But here, the affection of Kunti Devi for the Pandavas and the Vrishnis was due to the family relation. This tie of affection in terms of material relation is the relation of Maya, because the relations of the body or the mind are due to the influence of external energy. Relations of the soul established in relation with the Supreme Soul are factual relations. When Kunti Devi wanted to cut off the family relation, she meant to cut off the relation of the skin. The skin relation is the cause of material bondage, but the relation of the soul is the cause of freedom. This relation of the soul to the soul can be established by the medium of the relation which with the supreme soul, super soul. Seeing in the darkness is not seeing, but seeing by the light of sun means to see the sun and everything else which was unseen in the darkness. That is the way of devotional service. Hare Krishna.
43. Sri Krishna Krishna Saka Vrishni Rishabhavani Drug Rajanya Vamsa Dahanana Pravarga Virya Govinda Godvija Surarti Haravatra Yogeshwara Kila Guru Bhagavan Namaste. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna Sagar Prabhu, can you read?
Hare Krishna. Translation. O Krishna, O friend of Arjuna, O chief amongst the descendants of Vrishni, you are the restorer of those political parties which are disturbing elements on this earth. Your prowess never deteriorates. You are the proprietor of the transcendental ego, and you descend to relieve the distress of the cows, the brahmanas, and the devotees. You possess all mystic powers, and you are the preceptor of the entire universe. You are the Almighty God, and I offer you my respectful obeisance. Purport. A summary of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is made herein by Srimati Kunti Devi. The Almighty Lord has his eternal transcendental abode where he is engaged in keeping Surapi cows. He is served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. He descends to the material world to reclaim his devotees and to annihilate the disturbing elements in groups of political parties and kings who are supposed to be in charge of administration work. He creates, maintains, and annihilates by his unlimited energies, and still he is always full with powers and does not deteriorate in potency. The cows, the brahmanas, and the devotees of the Lord are all objects of his special attention because they are very important factors for general welfare of living beings.
44. Purnavacha Pratayetam Kalapadai Parinutta Kilodhaya Mandam Sujahasa Vaikunto Mohayan Eva Mayaya. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna Sri Ganesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Suta Goswami said, the Lord, thus hearing the prayers of Kunti Devi, composed in choice words for his glorification, mindly smiled. That smile was an enchanting of his mystic power, purport. Anything that is enchanting in the world is said to be representation of the Lord, the conditioned soul, who are engaged in trying to lord it over the material world, are also enchanted by his mystic powers. But his devotees are enchanted in a different way by the glories of the Lord, and his merciful blessings are upon them. His energy is displaced in different ways, as electrical energy works in manifold capacities. Srimati Kunti Devi has prayed to the Lord just to enunciate a fragment of his glories. All his devotees worship him in that way, by chosen words, and therefore the Lord is known as Uttama Shloka. No amount of chosen words is sufficient to enumerate the Lord's glory. and yet he is the satisfied by such prayers as the Father is satisfied even by the broken linguistic attempts of the growing child. The word Maya is used both in sense of delusion and mercy. Herein, the word Maya is used in the sense of the Lord's mercy upon Kunti Devi. Hare Krishna.
45. ताम्बादम् इति उपामन्त्रया प्रविश्य गजास्वयं स्त्रियश्च स्वपुरं यास्यां प्रेमराञ्जननिवृता. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Translation. Thus, accepting the prayers of Srimati Kunti Devi, the Lord subsequently informed other ladies of his departure by entering the palace of Hastinapura. But upon preparing to leave, he was stopped by King Yudhishthira, who implored him lovingly. Purport. No one could make Lord Krishna stay at Hastinapura when he decided to start for Dwarka. But the simple request of King Yudhishthira that the Lord remain there for a few days more was immediately effective. This signifies that the power of King Yudhishthira was loving affection, which the Lord could not deny. The Almighty God is thus conquered only by loving service and nothing else. He is fully independent in all his dealings, but he voluntarily accepts obligations by loving affection of his pure devotees.
46. व्यासद्यैर् ईश्वरे जना कृष्णाद्भुत कर्मणा प्रबोधितो पितिहासिर न बुध्यते सुचर्पिता. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Saraswati Mataji. Hare Krishna. Okay. Hare Krishna, Anita Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. King Yudhishthira, who was much aggrieved, could not be convinced, despite instructions by great sages headed by Vyasa and the Lord Krishna himself, the performer of superhuman feats, and despite all historical evidence. Purport. The pious king Yudhishthira was mortified because of the massacre of human beings in the battle of Kurukshetra, especially on his account. Duryodhana was there on the throne, and he was doing well in his administration, and in one sense there was no need of fighting. But on the principle of justice, Yudhishthira was to replace him. The whole clique of politics centered around this point, and all the kings and residents of the whole world became involved in this fight between the rival brothers. Lord Krishna was also there on the side of King Yudhishthira. It is said in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva 20, that 640 million men were killed in the 18 days of the battle of Kurukshetra, and some hundreds of thousands were missing. Practically, this was the greatest battle in the world within 5,000 years. This mass killing simply to enthrone Maharaja Yudhishthira was too mortifying, so he tried to be convinced with evidence from histories by great sages like Vyasa and the Lord himself that the fight was just because the cause was just. But Maharaja Yudhishthira would not be satisfied. Even though he was instructed by the great personalities of the time, Krishna was designated herein as the performer of superhuman actions. But in this particular instance, neither he or Vyasa could convince King Yudhishthira. Does it mean that he failed to be a superhuman actor? No, certainly not. The interpretation is that the Lord is Ishvara, or the super soul in the hearts of both King Yudhishthira and Vyasa. Perform still more superhuman action because the Lord desired it. As super soul of King Yudhishthira, he did not allow the king to be convinced by the words of Vyasa and others, including himself, because he desired that the king hear instructions from the dying Bhishma Deva, who was another great devotee of the Lord. The Lord wanted that at the last stage of his material existence, the great warrior Bhishma Deva see him personally and see his beloved grandchildren, King Yudhishthira, etc., now situated on the throne and thus pass away very peacefully. Bhishma Deva was not at all satisfied to fight against the Pandavas, who were his beloved fatherless grandchildren. But the Kshatriyas are also very stern people, and therefore he was obliged to take the side of Duryodhana because he was maintained at the expense of Duryodhana. Besides this, the Lord also desired that King Yudhishthira be pacified by the words of Bhishma Deva, so that the world could see that Bhishma Deva excelled all in knowledge, including the Lord himself. Hare Krishna.
47. Aharaja dharma sutas chintayen suhridam vadam prakrutenatma vipra sneha moha vasangata. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Swapna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. King Yudhishthira, son of Dharma, overwhelmed by the earth by the death of his friends, was aggrieved just like a common materialistic man. O sages, thus deluded by affection, he began to speak. Purport. King Yudhishthira, though he was not expected to become aggrieved like a common man, became deluded by the worldly affection, by the will of the Lord, just as Arjuna was apparently deluded. A man who sees knows well that the living entity is neither the body nor the mind, but is transcendental to the material conception of life. The common man thinks of violence and non-violence in terms of the body, but that is a kind of delusion. Everyone is duty bound according to one's occupational duties. A Kshatriya is bound to fight for the right cause, regardless of the opposite party. In such discharge of duty, one should not be disturbed any annihilation of the material body, which is only an external dress of the living soul. All this was perfectly known to Maharaja Yudhishthira, but by the will of the Lord, he became just like a common man, because there was another great idea behind this delusion. The king would be instructed by Bhishma as Arjuna was instructed by Lord himself. Hare Krishna.
48. Aho me pashyata jnanam hridirudam duratmanah parakshayesheva dehasya bhavyo me shaunirhatah. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Sarasija Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. King Yudhishthira said, "O my Lord, I am the most sinful man. Just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many phalanxes of men." Purport. A solid phalanx of 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,650 infantry, and 65,000 cavalry is called as Akshauhini, and many Akshauhinis were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhishthira, as the most pious king of the world, takes for himself the responsibility for killing such a huge number of living beings, because the battle was fought to reinstate him on the throne. This body is, after all, meant for others. While there is life in the body, it is meant for the service of others. And when it is dead, it is meant to be eaten by dogs and jackals or maggots. He is sorry because for such a temporary body, such a huge massacre was committed. Hare Krishna.
49. Baladvija suhrunmitra pitru pratru guru drudha namesyan nirayan moksho pi api varshayayuttayutte. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Sagar Babu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. I have killed many boys, brahmanas, well-wishers, friends, parents, preceptors, and brothers. Though I live millions of years, I will not be relieved from the hell that awaits me for all these sins. Purport. Whenever there is a war, there is certainly a massacre of many innocent living beings, such as boys, brahmanas, and women, whose killing is considered to be the greatest of sins. They are all innocent creatures, and in all circumstances, killing of them is forbidden. In the scriptures, Maharaj Yudhishthira was aware of these mass killings. Similarly, there were friends, parents, and preceptors also on both sides, and all of them were killed. It was simply horrible for him to think of such killings, and therefore he was thinking of residing in hell for millions and billions of years. Hare Krishna.
50. Naino Rajna Praja Bratu Dharma Yudde Vadodvisham Iti Me Natu Bodhaya Kalpade Sasanam Vachaha. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sri Ganesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. There is no sin for a king who kills for the right cause, who is engaged in maintaining his citizens, but this injunction is not applicable to me. Maharaja Yudhishthira thought that although he was not actually involved in the administration of the kingdom, which was being carried on the will of Duryodhana without harm to the citizens, he caused the killing of so many living beings only for his personal gain of the kingdom from the hands of Duryodhana. The killing was committed not in course of administration, but for the sake of self-aggrandizement. And as such, he thought himself responsible for all the sins. Hare Krishna.
51. Tina Madhata Bandhuna Droho Yo Asva Ihotita Karmavir Grame Diyar Naham Kalpo Vyapohitam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu. And read first
Hare
two
Krishna.
paragraphs. First two paragraphs.
Translation. I have killed many friends of women, and I have thus caused enmity to such an extent that it is not possible to undo it by material welfare work. Purport. The Grahamedis are those whose only business is to perform welfare work for the sake of material prosperity. Such material prosperity is sometimes hampered by sinful activities, for the materialist is sure to commit sins even unintentionally in the course of discharging material duties. To get relief from such sinful reactions, the Vedas prescribe several kinds of sacrifices. It is said in the Vedas that by performing the Ashwamedha Yagna, horse sacrifice, one can get relief from even Brahma Hatya, killing of a Brahmana. Yudhishthira Maharaj performed this Ashwamedha Yagna, but he thinks that even by performing such yagnas, it is not possible to get relief from the great sins committed. In war, either the husband or the brother or even the father or sons go to fight. And when they are killed, a fresh enmity is created, and thus a chain of actions and reactions increases, which is not possible to be counteracted even by thousands of Ashwamedha Yagnas.
The way of work, the way of work, karma, is like that. It creates one action and other reaction simultaneously, and thus increases the chain of material activities, binding the performer in material bondage. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.27 and 28, the remedy is suggested that such actions and reactions of the path of work can be checked only when work is done on behalf of the Supreme Lord. The battle of Kurukshetra was actually fought by the will of Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, as it is evident from his version, and only by his will was Yudhishthira placed on the throne of Hastinapura. Therefore, factually no sin whatsoever touched the Pandavas, who were only the order carriers of the Lord. For others, who declare war out of personal interest, the whole responsibility lies on them. Hare Krishna.
52. Yata Pankena Pankamba Surya va Surakritam Bhutahatyam Tataivakyam Na Yagnir Marshatam Arhati. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Anita Madhuri.
Hare Krishna. Translation. As it is not possible to filter muddy water through mud or purify a wine-stained pot with wine, it is not possible to contract the killing of men by sacrificing animals. Purport. Ashwamedha yagnas or Gomedha yagnas sacrifices in which a horse or a bull is sacrificed were not, of course, for the purpose of killing the animals. Lord Chaitanya said that such animals sacrificed on the altar of yagna were regenerated and a new life was given to them. It was just to prove the efficacy of the hymns of the Vedas. By recitation of the hymns of the Vedas in the proper way, certainly the performer gets relief from the reactions of sins. But in case of such sacrifices, improperly done under the inexpert management, surely one has to become responsible for animal sacrifice. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, there is no possibility of performing the yagnas perfectly for want of expert brahmanas who are able to conduct such yagnas.
Hare Krishna. We'll give a chance to other devotee. Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji. Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji. Anita Mataji, you can continue.
Maharaja Yudhishthira therefore gives a hint to performing sacrifices in the age of Kali. In the Kali Yuga, the only sacrifice recommended is the performance of Harinama Yagna, inaugurated by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But one should not indulge in animal killing and contract it by performing the Harinama Yagna. Those who are the devotees of the Lord never kill an animal for self-interest, and as the Lord ordered Arjuna, they do not refrain from performing the duty of a Kshatriya. The whole purpose, therefore, is served when everything is done for the will of the Lord. This is possible only for the devotees. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of first canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Prayers by Queen Kunti and Parikshit saved.
Perfect way to conclude. This only sacrifice which can be recommended in this Kali Yuga is Harinam Sankirtana Yajna. The rest of the yajnas we cannot do it. So, but chanting the holy names and hearing about the holy names is the only way by which we can deliver ourselves. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you, Ganesh Prabhu. Thank you, Sagar Prabhu. Thank you, Anita Mataji, Swapna Mataji, Abhishek Prabhu, and Satya Mataji. Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyo cha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Transcendental book Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Let us meet again next Thursday at the same time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.